Many of you know I'm a true advocate for taking supplementation to optimize your health, and one of the best things that you can do is to choose the right collagen. It's a building block for your entire body. I was introduced to the Sparkle Wellness product, the Skin Boost Plus, about a year ago, and I've been taking it ever since. Having struggled with growing my hair out while I was prepping for the Mrs. America pageant, the Skin Boost Plus product could not have come at a better time. It's formulated with a special bioactive collagen known as Verisol. Verisol collagen is scientifically proven to reduce the fine lines underneath the eyes, around the mouth, and also grow stronger and healthier hair. It truly is feeding your beauty from the inside out. Skin Boost Plus not only contains the Verisol collagen, but it contains hyaluronic acid as well as vitamin C, which aids in skin health and boosts your immunity. This is super important these days. In addition, Skin Boost Plus, Sparkle Wellness offers a collagen supplement formulated for joint health called Joint Boost, and a collagen supplement formulated for promoting lean muscle mass called Muscle Boost. So we've got the Sparkle Collagen, the Muscle Boost, and the Joint Boost. And right now, you can get any of the Sparkle Wellness collagen supplements from Amazon or from their website, which is lovesparkle.life, and you can use my code. It's Dr. Fit, that's DRFIT, and that will get you 20% off their delicious range of collagen products for skin, joint, and muscles. Thank you to Sparkle for your amazing products and for sponsoring the Fit and Fabulous podcast. Welcome to the Fit and Fabulous podcast with Dr. Jaime Semen. Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Dr. Jaime and welcome to the Fit and Fabulous podcast. This one is super exciting today. It's been a long time coming. My guest and I have been trying to connect now for a while. We wanted to do this in person, and last year she got sick and it didn't work out. So the fact that we're here together in this room means a lot to me. Dr. Gabrielle Lyon is on the Fit and Fabulous podcast today. I don't even have a bio to read, so I'm just going to let her tell her story and your credentials.
Yeah, all right.
We're going to talk about a lot of amazing stuff.
So I'm so glad that I'm here. And it's a long time coming. How long have we known each other? It's got to be at least going on 3 years.
It's a couple years, all through social media.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the connectivity of the world. I mean, it's incredible that you can literally meet people from any continent. I mean, we've talked on the phone, we FaceTime, and she's supported me in all my endeavors.
So proud of you.
Just on a human level and a mom and somebody being in medicine.
Yeah.
I think it's a isolating space sometimes, you know, working as a physician and trying to be a mom and trying to do a lot of things.
Yeah, and also just being a savage. Like, come on.
I'm trying to be at Dr. Lyon.
Going all in.
Yeah.
So I am a fellowship trained physician. I trained with one of the world leading protein experts, Dr. Donald Layman. He's mentored me for the last 20 years.
Incredible.
It's been an amazing relationship. Did my undergraduate in human nutrition, vitamin, mineral metabolism, medical school. And then I actually did 2 years of psychiatry. I don't know if you know that. So I trained University of Louisville.
Everybody's got a little bit of crazy in them.
Yeah, no, it was real crazy. So I switched out of that, did family medicine, and then I did a fellowship in obesity medicine, geriatrics, and nutritional sciences at WashU.
What a path.
In St. Louis. But, you know, as you would say, it's all interwoven, right? Obesity, aging, nutrition, longevity. It really has a culminating effect.
Was there something like along the way that made you take that path, like a personal experience, or was it just like the drive for more, information about chronic disease?
I would say there's always a drive for more, right? When you are a professional student or really interested in education and scholarly activity, that's going to happen. Always trying to understand. And luckily, I was mentored by this world-class scientist, so there was a level of expectation.
Yeah.
We all have certain mentors in our life that have an expectation that is above and beyond that maybe at the time we have for ourselves.
Right.
So I went, through the human nutrition experience, training. That was a long time coming. Always loved it. I really didn't like medical school, and I absolutely hated training.
Tell me.
It's just like I hated it. I must have tried to quit at least twice.
Like the content?
All of it.
Having to be in the class?
Yeah, all of it. I was really interested in athletics. I was training. I was doing fitness and figure and having to sit in the classroom. And, what I was learning, which is exactly what you were learning, it's all pathology. I mean, it's just brutal. Mm-hmm. So I hated that part. And then I wasn't even going to do a residency. But because of this drive for contribution and learning, you can't just not do it, right? You do, in order to really be good at something, you have to know the foundation, ultimately. So I originally went into psychiatry because I thought that was going to be a moment where it was going to be this high level thinking, really about being the best version of yourself. I really was a bit naive. Mm-hmm. I went into psychiatry thinking it was all about resiliency, mental toughness, understanding the human mind. But what I found was that it was really pathology of brain.
Right. These are sick people.
Not fun.
On a cellular level.
Right. Yeah. So that wasn't fun. But I would say that I really learned a lot. I mean, you learn how to interface. You learn the spectrum of disease. That was fascinating. Then I did family medicine. So I decided that was not for me. I did family medicine. At the time, I was still really interested in functional medicine. So Mark Hyman trained me. I would go up to his clinic for 2 years straight, train me in functional medicine. That was great. Still a really good friend. And really the path for me was family medicine at that time to be able to have a breadth of knowledge.
Be able to treat men, women.
Yeah, everything.
Everything in between.
Everything. And then a fellowship at WashU, I would say I was very underprepared for that. It was a mix between clinical training and research. And I was totally out of my element. But by the time I graduated, I would say that I feel as if I'm a very well-trained physician coming out. And back to your original question, why did I do that? And I would say that I was so inspired by the people that I was seeing, and I felt that we were really failing. And that's actually where this concept of muscle-centric medicine came from. There was a moment, I was imaging people's brains. So we were working on this study that looked at the interface of obesity and brain function. And she was a mother of 3 in her late 40s, early 50s. I imaged her brain, and we were doing metabolic ward studies, we were doing cognitive testing. It was very expensive, elaborate studies. And her brain looked like an Alzheimer's brain.
Wow.
And she was so young. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, I feel that we had really failed her. I felt responsible, even though I hadn't known her. I just felt what we were doing with the medical system was failing these people. The next 10 years, she probably is going to struggle with some pretty significant cognitive impairment. And that's really where muscle-centric medicine was born. This concept that muscle is the organ of longevity, and we're totally missing the boat.
Yeah. So you practice a lot differently than most traditional Western doctors. Is there anything that we are doing right in Western medicine?
Yeah. When it comes to delivering a baby, right?
Right.
But I'm also not against Western medicine. What we're missing is the lifestyle component.
Right.
We're totally missing that. Traditionally, physicians aren't trained in nutrition, and should they be? I don't know. It's a heavy lift. I did 7 years of nutritional training. That's a lot of training. But what we are doing right is obviously acute emergencies. And, what is also really important is managing the interface. So let's say someone is obese. I actually am very pro obesity medication because you've got to move the needle.
They're tools.
They're tools.
Yeah.
You can't just let people suffer for extended periods of time. Yeah. So there's that.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think it's such an interesting place as a physician to tread because you see people on one side that completely reject functional integrative. They're quacks. It's all like woo-woo, all the way over to I'm, academic. This is evidence-based.
Right.
This is what the science shows, right? And then you have people like I would describe myself, I'm with you. You present patients with all of these options, and it's great that we have all of these tools, and you meet people where they are and you figure out what's best because it's just so individualized what, people's needs are. And, social media is so polarizing. I mean, especially going through 2020 and the COVID-19 pandemic, I mean, people, you can't totally reject it. Like, yes, our medical system definitely needs a lot of fixes, but just tossing the baby out with the bathwater is not the answer.
And I also think that the best physicians integrate both.
Yeah.
You have to be skilled at both. And
I think it's just that most physicians don't have the education and the knowledge to get people better. I mean, so let's talk about that. What is muscle-centric medicine?
It's the concept that muscle is the largest organ in the body. Everything that we do in medicine, or at least in my practice, is really geared towards leveraging that tissue. Whether it's training, hormone optimization, getting rid of body fat, nutritional strategies, those kinds of things, medication.
Yeah. So I think when people hear muscle-centric medicine, they're imagining like this bodybuilder that's like super lean.
Don't you wish it was that easy?
Like super ripped.
Yeah.
And I did this physique competition last year. Like that is a level of titration that most people are not going to be able to execute in the real world. So let's talk about strategies from a nutritional standpoint that support muscle-centric medicine.
Well, we know that dietary protein arguably is the most controversial nutrient, but really important for muscle health. And there's a lot of confusion in the space because it seems as if that nutrition has become very polarized. It wasn't like, I don't know if you remember, it wasn't like that 5 years ago, 7 years ago. Nobody cared. By the way, I get off the plane and there's like big meat, like posters in the
Omaha Steak.
I have never seen that anywhere ever.
Welcome to beef country.
I mean, it was hilarious.
Yes.
It was.
We also have a lot of corn.
Okay, well, I didn't see those. I didn't see the corn
but
poster.
The advertisement of,
But it was so interesting because obviously I live in New York and the feelings and thoughts around meat and nutrition are vastly different. When it comes to muscle health, we cannot deny that dietary protein is what is necessary. You cannot build muscle on carbohydrates. You just can't. They're the building blocks. And, the recommendation is 0.8 grams per kilogram right now in the RDA. That's very outdated. Mm-hmm. That's the minimum to prevent deficiencies. And arguably, that's not even enough. I mean, yes, according to nitrogen balance studies, which are the studies that, originally came from growth in animal husbandry. It was one of the ways that they looked at how we could grow animals the cheapest way possible. Mm. And that's where these nitrogen balance studies came from. So it's somewhat of an extrapolation. And typically it was originally used for soldiers, 18-year-old men. 0.8 grams per kilogram is way too low. The new recommendations and the evidence that we're seeing is probably closer to 1.6 grams per kilogram.
Yeah.
Now then,
double.
Yeah, it's almost double. And then the next question becomes, well, is it animal or plant-based proteins? Are all proteins equal? Proteins are made of 20 amino acids. 9 of those are essential, which means we have to eat them. Of those 9 essentials, there are 3 branch chains which really determine the quality of protein. You and I could look at a cow and go, wow, what makes up that structure of the cow is going to be different than what makes up that structure of a celery stick.
Right.
And on a very fundamental basis, the compositions are different. Can you eat enough plants to meet your protein needs? Totally. But that's really nearsighted in the way that you need all the food in terms of a food matrix, creatine, choline, but for a baby's brain function.
Yeah. Yeah. When we look at the nutrients required for a pregnant patient to grow and build a human baby, choline, mm-hmm. right? DHA, amino acids, fats. I think it's mathematically impossible to eat a plant-based diet and get all those nutrients. I mean, when patients come in and telling me they're eating a vegan or vegetarian diet and either pregnant or attempting pregnancy, that's a tall hill to climb. Mm-hmm. When you're thinking about getting enough protein, getting enough nutrients, massive amounts of supplementation to make sure that we don't fail. That's like the prenatal vitamin is like an insurance policy. That's what I tell people. It's an insurance policy because nobody's perfect, but you really should be getting the most bioavailable nutrients from your food. And it's hard to do that when you exclude animal food.
And then the question becomes, are we thinking about a whole food diet? And I would argue that we should. Could you have a bunch of processed pea proteins? Yeah, but we don't really know what's in it. It's not just pea protein. Just like with soy, there's isoflavonoids. There's other stuff in pea that we just don't necessarily know what that is. And we don't know the long-term implications of that. So back to your original question is, what is best for muscle health? And I would say over the long term, these are animal-based products. And again, this is not an ethical conversation. This is purely biological numbers, nutrient density, and food matrix.
What are your thoughts about protein supplementation with whey, egg whites? People ask female patients a lot. It's, very difficult for them when I say eat this amount of protein this many times a day. They're looking for convenience. They want the protein bars and the shakes and things like that. Is it good enough? Does it fill the gaps?
I mean, I feel that whey is a whole food, whether it's whey concentrate with all the immunoglobulins or even whey isolate, but whey is a whole food. In terms of egg white proteins, you mean like the shakes? I mean, I prefer whole foods, but if that is their option, then yeah.
And what about same thing, plant-based protein powders versus animal-based?
I think that there's a lot of estrogen-like activity in pea. We know that to be true. Does that necessarily translate to a health endpoint that's negative? No, but we also were never designed to eat isolated estrogen-like compounds in that same way.
Yeah, so soy is what you're referring to.
Soy or even, or pea.
Pea, yeah.
Pea has like 4 million times more estrogen-like activity than, and I'm not saying estrogen, but estrogen-like activity. And over the long term, we are now making these frankenfoods that didn't exist before. And I have concerns about that because we're now shifting from a whole foods diet to a processed food diet. And what I think is happening is we're losing sight of the fact that we were designed to eat a well-rounded whole foods diet. And we have industry that comes in and can make a lot of claims. And at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, who stands to benefit? Who's getting paid for this?
Right.
Who is profiting? And I would say that it's largely the processed food companies. It's not commodities like beef or egg or dairy.
Right.
It's the processed food companies that are selling to consumers. And now we're moving into this sustainability argument, which, if we were to take a step back, sustainability really is about industry, electricity, not agriculture, transportation. Agriculture, according to the EPA, is roughly 9%. But we waste a lot of food. We drive cars.
Right.
And collectively, that makes up 80% or more.
Right. I mean, we're shipping in Nebraska, we're shipping our corn, our wheat, all sorts of places.
Are you eating avocados? There's no way that there is one avocado that grows in those cornfields.
I have attempted to plant an avocado tree here in Nebraska, and it can't be done. It can't be done.
So, well, there you go.
Avocados from Mexico.
But if people were really concerned about the environment and agricultural's contribution to the environment, I think that the conversation needs to be explained much better. And I think that we need to go in eyes wide open as opposed to being told what to think. Right now, we're getting our information from Instagram and these places where it's inaccurate.
Yeah. What do you think about, people will make the argument with commercial agriculture that like the beef isn't quality, the ways the animals are raised, the ways the chickens are raised, the fact that they're fed a lot of, GMO, high omega-6 grains and things like that. If people are looking for protein sources, what advice do you have for them?
I mean, the majority of the industry, for example, beef, they're usually ranchers. First of all, we have to understand that there's poor practices in every industry, including medicine.
Yeah.
Including cosmetology. Every single industry has poor practices. The idea that we should eliminate eating cattle because of poor practices, or only eat organic, regenerative farmed animals, I think is really limiting for people. But the reality is most of the beef and animal products come from small farms. Beef spends the majority of its life grazing. Then it potentially, depending on what it is, goes to a feedlot and is finished.
So in 2020, we're actually eating less red meat than we were years ago.
Yeah.
but we still see the rates of chronic disease, obesity, diabetes, neurologic disorders on the rise. So then what is causing that? It's obviously not the red meat, even though politically people want it to be that.
I mean, we're eating a bunch of processed foods and we're over consuming carbohydrates and we're not moving.
So let's talk about carbs. How does one determine how many carbohydrates they should?
Start low. You know, I think about this a lot. There's a couple ways to determine carbohydrate needs. Number one, physiologically. And what do I mean by physiologically? The body has a meal threshold of carbohydrates, assuming that the individual has healthy skeletal muscle, excuse me, healthy skeletal muscle, insulin resistance really begins in skeletal muscle, which is not discussed.
When you say healthy skeletal muscle, how does one know that? So they're just physically
sedentary behavior is a disease state.
Okay.
The idea that if you look at the literature and you see healthy sedentary, that's not true.
Yeah.
Sedentary behavior is, in essence, a disease state. We were not designed to not move. So the question is carbohydrates. How do we determine our carbohydrate intake? And I would say the first thing is understanding physiologically that there is a meal threshold. Typically, anything over 40 grams of carbohydrates, if say you wanted to consume carbohydrates, anything above 40 grams will spike insulin. You're on a roller coaster.
So 3 meals a day, that's 120 carbs, which by all standards is very
I mean, the RDA is 130 grams. That's too high. But understanding the meal threshold would be no more than 40 grams of carbohydrates unless you are doing some crazy activity. And, you know, some people are keto adapted or whatever their preferences are. But also understanding that you don't actually have a dietary requirement for carbohydrates. But from a physiological perspective, when you think about it, there's only one way to deal with excess carbohydrates. There's only one way. It's insulin. Mm-hmm. But if you're hypoglycemic, the body has a million ways to deal with it. Whether it's counter-regulatory hormones and cortisol, it has multiple ways to deal with a low blood sugar, but it only has one way to deal with a high blood sugar.
Right.
What does that mean to me and what should that mean to the listener is that carbohydrates are toxic. We're not designed, we need glucose, but we're not designed to ingest it at high amounts, in high amounts. Mm-hmm. We're just not. Mm-hmm. So starting low, maybe you start with 90 grams. If you have triglycerides that are over 100, perhaps you start even lower. But it doesn't have to be a crash diet. It should be sustainable. Understanding.
Which by most labs, triglycerides of 149 is technically
normal. Way too high.
Yeah.
Way too high.
I left 42. What are yours?
I'd have to look. No.
All right.
I don't need many carbs.
Draw blood. Somebody get a phlebotomist.
But they're low. So understanding that you don't need carbohydrates, that it is and can be toxic in overconsumption, and also understanding your total caloric need. There's many calculators to determine what that is. I do believe calories matter. Determining your total caloric need, optimized for dietary protein, which from my perspective is 1 gram per pound ideal body weight. Mm-hmm. People can titrate up or down depending on age, depending on activity, and then adding in carbohydrates.
So with age, you say age or activity. So obviously I'm thinking you're more active, obviously more protein.
Or if you're young, you don't need as much.
Right. So age is more protein.
Age is more protein. And, it's really interesting. There's a great study by, I think it's Nicholas Bird, and he showed that obese tissue has a blunted muscle protein synthesis response. Mm. So arguably, one could think that obese tissue actually needs more dietary protein. Mm. And there's a lot of controversy. People will say, the low carb, high fat group is not about high protein, which is interesting. And a
traditional ketogenic diet is going to be less than 20% protein.
Yes, but the individuals in the space are very against a higher protein diet. I was talking to my friend Ted Naiman about it, and because him and I are very much aligned in our views, and there's a lot of pushback from the high fat community that they're somewhat really just into the high fat as opposed to higher protein. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I would say it's just my lung. I'm just kidding. I would say from an aging perspective, yeah, thank you. I would say from an aging perspective, it's not ideal. I'm a trained geriatrician. Mm-hmm. We don't recommend particularly high fat because high fat isn't going to protect skeletal muscle. And also protein turnover, which is the body's ability to replenish all tissues, that capacity decreases as you age. There's multiple hallmarks of aging. protein turnover decreases, satellite cells, which are the cells that nourish muscle tissue, decrease, the nerve innervation decreases, the tissue quality changes, the morphology of the actual skeletal muscle tissue changes. It becomes less healthy, it becomes more insulin resistant. There's a whole host of things that happen. To keep healthy muscle tissue, you need dietary protein and you need training. Those are the two things that you can do. It's really interesting. There's not one pill that would have the effect globally that exercise does.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure if scientists could figure that out, they would make a lot of money.
They've tried.
So nutritionally, eat lots of protein, start low with the carbs, titrate up as insulin sensitivity allows. Moderate fat. Are there people, though, that higher carbs would be good for?
I work well on high carbs. I don't do well on high fat. And I think that it's more just anecdotal. Shane, my husband.
But you've got a lot of really quality muscle.
Maybe, yeah.
And muscle's a great disposal agent for carbs.
Right, so it's the primary site of glucose disposal. I do want to mention fat. I think that excess saturated fat's a problem. You know, I'm not saying that saturated fat in and of itself, I mean, to some individuals that respond, that are hyper responders to saturated fat. But overall, excess saturated fat, which I think we're eating more of, is an issue.
Do you think it's genetic? I mean, do you think that there's,
Yeah, but I do think that there's a component of saturated fat when people are over consuming it that creates issues.
Yeah. But at the same time, people are listening right now and saying, oh, saturated fat, red meat has a lot of saturated fat.
It's actually mostly monounsaturated.
Right. So I just want to highlight that.
Yeah.
So when we're saying, saturated fat, like it's not that stay away from red meat.
No.
But it's just
choose leaner cuts. Like we use Piedmontese, choose leaner cuts.
Yeah. More omega-3s.
Nobody is sitting down with a cup of saturated fat.
Yeah.
I mean, like I guess you could.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So nutritionally, we've talked about that. Carbs, protein, moderate fat. Be careful with saturated fat, especially for certain individuals. I agree with you. I have noticed, playing with different proteins that definitely my body composition responds differently depending on the profile, of fats that I'm eating. I think that's probably a real thing. So then let's talk about training, because you basically said getting adequate dietary protein and training.
Yeah.
So what do people have to do? What kind of resistance training? What about cardiovascular exercise? How many minutes?
I think the quality matters. There's that saying, showing up is half the battle. Mm-hmm. No, it's not. Showing up is none of the battle. You actually have to go in and have a lot of intention, and you need to be training. It is not this mindless activity. We were designed for hard physical movement. That is how we were evolutionary designed. This is what is required of us to be in even baseline health. Yeah. So what would I recommend? Number one, being very conscientious and lifting. Do you have to lift heavy? So the data would suggest you don't. So Stu Phillips, a friend of mine, has published quite a few studies on this. He cares more about volume and he cares more about the perceived exertion. So actually going to failure. In my mind, would that create a stimulus that's necessary? According to the evidence, it would. Keep in mind that a lot of the training studies are mostly done in healthy, younger individuals. Mm-hmm. They respond differently. They respond quicker. The muscle is supple. It's primed to respond. Versus older individuals, coming from an untrained state to a trained state. So there's issues with the literature, and over a period of time, we're continuing to see more as it relates to a body of evidence. But focused resistance training, going to failure, I recommend 3 to 4 times a week, at least. But that's not the current recommendation. Current recommendation would be train twice a week. Mm-hmm. Do resistance training twice, maybe 3 times a week. I would say double that. Mm-hmm. I would say double that. You hit each body part at least twice a week. But again, actually, I was thinking about this earlier. This is all very arbitrary. A well-designed program is a well-designed program. So for me, recently, I was training heavy 3 days a week legs. Do I train upper body? Yeah, I might do some pull-ups. I might do some basic stuff. So that is resistance exercise, which is this idea of generating strength. But again, it has to be a well-designed program. So keep in mind from a foundational standpoint, resistance training, which helps create glycogen flux. And not just with the resistance. When I say glycogen flux, I should really reframe that. Substrate flux, whether it's fat within the muscle. And again, endurance exercise also plays a role in this, but really kind of thinking about your muscle as a suitcase. You have to unpack it. You can't just sit there and not utilize these substrates. You have to empty the tank.
You mean like when I come home from vacation and my suitcase that's on the floor for a couple weeks?
Yeah.
And I don't
Mine, I still have 2 suitcases. I have not stopped traveling, but because you asked me to be here, you're the only thing. No, I didn't. Oh. I have 4 suitcases. They're all still packed. Can't even deal with it. They're literally all packed. So understanding that resistance exercise, really focused mind connection is very important. Understanding that throwing in high intensity interval training, notice I didn't say sprint intensity interval training, high intensity interval training where you're really pushing that heart rate, whether your VO2 max is upwards of 80. And doing that really a 4-minute session is valuable once a week. It improves insulin sensitivity. It really stresses the body. It allows the body to then go to recover. I think it's really helpful.
4 minutes once a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're going hard.
Hard. Really hard.
It's not fun.
Out of breath.
So the data would support 4 to 9% of all your entire training should be hit. So in a 60-minute training session, that's like 2.4 minutes. It's nothing.
Yeah.
But it's the effort that matters.
Right.
And then, of course, there's endurance training, and endurance is just more cardiovascular. And there's a lot of pushback about that. I do believe people should do at least 150 minutes. And I have to be honest, I haven't been doing it lately because I just have a lot of moving parts. I'm obviously still strength training, but in terms of having the extra time to do endurance, as soon as I get back from this trip, I'm not traveling for a month. So I'll get back.
You're lifting hard for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting cardiovascular.
You are.
But you're saying beyond doing that, doing some sort of, you're talking like treadmill.
Totally.
Elliptical.
It's like zone 2 training.
Yeah.
You can talk, it's easy. There are cardiovascular benefits that you don't get from lifting. And also a lot of the research from myokines, which is the proteins secreted from muscle, are actually from endurance. BDNF, can you get it through resistance? Again, this is a newer science, yes. But there is something beautiful about the orchestra and the synergy of working all these different modalities, which are largely intertwined. As humans, we like to put things in buckets. Doesn't necessarily need to be in buckets, but thinking about mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the generation of these energy producing cells, thinking about, again, emptying the tank, thinking about cardiovascular health, thinking about stability and flexibility, and also these myokines, which there are hundreds of them, do different things. And I think that a very well-rounded program, it also allows your nervous system to recover. It trains your nervous system to deal with perceived stress.
Incredible. Let's talk about the extremes. Can people overtrain? Is there a point, a threshold where more is not better?
The elite athletes that I take care of, definitely. So there's this push towards health, and arguably how much training do we need for health is probably not that much. But again, we don't have really sensitive markers. We don't.
Right.
What are we looking at? Your triglycerides, okay, but are we looking at visceral fat? Are we looking at muscle mass? We don't, we use appendicular skeletal mass, but do we really know what someone's optimal potential is? We don't. When it comes to overtraining, and again, this is something I've thought about quite a bit. The evidence would suggest that the more intense and the higher level your sport, the less health outcomes you're going to have, right? That meaning the less healthy, let me rephrase that, the less healthier you're going to be. Like the SEALs going through buds. They're training to some extreme level. I look at their blood work all the time. These guys are a mess.
Interesting.
But the average person, the majority of humans do not overtrain. And the only time that they do is because they have external stressors outside of the training. So the body doesn't differentiate, is this a physical stress or is this emotional stress? The body doesn't.
Running a bear, or are you...
Or are you stressed at work? Yeah, so that's when I see individuals have issues with overtraining. It's not necessarily from an effort, energy, output standpoint, but it's more a calm. Yes, that's it. That's it.
I was just reading an article. One of our speakers here shared about sympathetic overactivity and vasospastic angina. Basically, people who get like chest tightness, and we know that. I mean, you look at these silly data facts, like Super Bowl weekend, people have more heart attacks, or like these weird times in our life where we have acute stressors. Yeah. It's a real thing.
But I do think that people do not work hard enough in the gym, and this might offend some of you friends, but it's just the truth. Mm-hmm. People are typically not working as hard as they should be. Mm-hmm. And whether you feel like you are working hard, come train with Jaime or come train with someone, and then you will really see what hard effort looks like. Right. Which is one of the reasons I believe that you should either do a challenge or work with a trainer to just experience what a real push is. Mm-hmm. And people might say, oh, well, that's all arbitrary, and maybe getting off of the sofa for me is hard, or any number of things. But I do think that, we have one life, and I do think that there is a level of creating grit and resilience that has to happen. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's not always discussed, and you might get advice from your doctor, like exercise more. What does that really mean? No, it means really suck it. It should suck.
It should be painful.
And you should experience that, so then you can actually properly gauge what is truly hard work. Are you on your phone? Are you paying attention versus what's not?
Yeah, I found as a collegiate athlete, I thrive in an environment where I want to work out with somebody that's like fitter, faster, stronger.
100%.
All the things, because that is going to push me. And I tell patients that I'm like, I don't know, do you have a really fit friend? Do you have go hang out with them? Just start doing whatever they're doing.
I think that's right.
You will become the people you hang out with.
This is true.
Better or for worse.
It's true.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's obviously a mental, a mindset component to all of this. Because I think, there's probably people that could spout off a lot of the things you've already said. Yeah, eat protein, lift weights, do that. But I feel like the magic sauce is how do you get people to do that? What advice do you have for people that just seem to be stuck mentally?
I think that that's a worthiness issue. And people have to actually face the hard truth that if you don't feel worthy of having the body you want, obtaining the goals that you want, you're never going to try. You'll find every excuse in the book. And at the end of people's lives, because as a trained geriatrician, I took care of people at the end of their life. You don't want to have that regret on the table. Mm-hmm. So number one is focus on self-worth, truly. You have to do that. They have to feel worthy enough. And then think about and be very cognizant of the actions on a daily basis. Are you being the person that you want to become? Are those actions in alignment with who you want to become? Your future self.
Right.
So you're closing the gap between your current self and your future self. Mm-hmm. I think about that a lot. Every decision I make, I think, okay, is this going to be and bring me closer to that future vision of the kind of person I need to be to do what I wish to do?
Mm-hmm. Incredible. Okay, so let's totally pivot. So Dr. Lyon's husband is also in medical training. What's it like being married to somebody in medicine? Because I have a partner that's not. Completely opposite.
Yeah. So he challenges everything that I say.
I did this first.
So I'm on the board for Hunter 7 Foundation. And Shane is really in this academic role where he's writing a lot of papers. Mm-hmm. So he calls himself the head researcher, and I'm the lackey researcher.
I love it.
So he is in charge. But what is it like being married to someone in medicine? He was a Navy SEAL for 10 years. He was a medic. I didn't know how the transition was going to be for him. He taught himself physics and calculus while he was deployed in Afghanistan.
Wow.
And if you know Shane, I feel like you know him. He loves you, by the way.
Hi, Shane.
Yeah. He probably won't listen to this, but because I always give him shit for not listening to any of my podcasts, but he'll have to listen to this one. I'm very humble. And what's so interesting is that he has no narrative. So I hated medical school. I hated residency. I really liked fellowship, but I bitched and complained the whole time. This is a guy who gets up at 4 a.m, studies, works, then crushes it on rotations, then comes home, spends maybe an hour with us, and then goes back to work until he falls asleep sitting up. You know how many times I've ever heard him complain? Not once. He has no narrative about it. Test is coming up. We have a very focused household. And here's what he said to me. So basically, I have a concierge medical practice. I have a lot of things kind of vying for my time, not to mention 2 very little children, but I have a lot of responsibilities. I work with companies. There's a lot of stuff on my plate. And I'm like, how do I get this done? And you know what he said to me? He said, well, if you really cared, and I wake up at 5. He said, if you really cared, you'd wake up earlier. He said, I should wake up at 4.
Yeah.
So what is it like living and being married to someone in medicine? I think he is a very unique bird in that way. But I will say, it's really important to have someone that drives you.
100%.
God is so super driven, and it's not flashy. It's all internally motivated.
Yeah, I think people, you said like he never complains. That's definitely something I really pay attention to. Was like the words that come out of your mouth are one thing, but the thoughts that you have in your mind tend to drive your action.
Totally.
Throughout the day.
It's like the self-worth.
And people who complain, and you guys can, listening right now, you can think of it. There's like somebody in your office, there's somebody in your family, like the chronic complainer, it's like a cancer.
Yeah.
It just permeates everything.
Yeah.
It brings down the vibe, it brings down the energy, and it starts to change people's actions around them. Like I don't think you could do what you do. I mean, you've got fingers out everywhere in the world. And I totally respect that as a mom doing all of these things. And people are like, I don't know how you do it. And the real answer is like, I don't know either.
Yeah.
Like, I just do it. I just wake up. I know what has to get done.
Totally.
And it just happens. And I think it honestly just comes from that kind of mindset.
Yep.
I'm not going to complain about my circumstances. Like I'm in charge of.
I don't even think about it like that.
Yeah.
Right? There's no narrative that goes alongside that. Wake up, execute. Yep. It's not a narrative. It's, okay, these are the tasks. This is the contribution I want to make. What is it that needs to get done? Oftentimes, the thoughts are consumed with creating this practice, the things that I'm doing within my concierge practice, and, thinking about different ways that we can leverage muscle-centric medicine in terms of how can we bring that to people. That's where my time is spent. It's not like, holy shit, I have so much to do. I mean, there are moments where I'm like, wow.
When you step back, you're like,
that's like a really large to-do list.
A lot of balls in the air right
That's
now.
like a very large to-do list, But I think that there's a certain amount of freedom that comes from a disciplined mind of execution. And I also think, like, all my friends, all my girlfriends, I mean, we're on it. We're cranking. We're, supporting each other. So, I mean, they own multiple businesses, or they're doing this or that. It's inspiring, And we all hold each other accountable. And just, again, you said the people that you surround yourself with, that's key. You want to be surrounded by winners.
Absolutely.
Because winners win.
Yep.
And that can be different for everybody. But winners win, and they have integrity. There are different kind of winners, but in my mind, there's only one. You have a core of characteristics. There's core moral values and characteristics. And then there's the way that you show up and execute on those. Yeah. It's almost like a personal ethos.
I love it. So for people listening, quit hanging out with lazy people. Quit playing small. I feel like people just really play small ball. I mean, if you are listening right now and you're like, that's me. I'm obese. I don't have enough muscle. I've got XYZ disease. Massive action. Like
no excuse, no narrative either.
Like wipe everything off the table and
feel worthy, man. You deserve it.
100%.
And typically when someone doesn't feel worthy, it's just old narratives, right? The brain is doing what the brain does, and that's produce thoughts.
Yeah.
And if you are not aware of those thoughts, there are 4 million of the same thoughts over and over again, you're going to be good at repeating it. And then you're going to be on autopilot. And then that is going to create a mode of mediocrity that you will spend your entire life trying to get out of.
Yeah.
Who wants to do that?
Okay, so you live a super fast-paced life like I do. How do you recover? How do you protect your physical, mental, spiritual resiliency?
Yeah, I would say that I don't really. I think I'm designed to work. Just at a very fundamental level, I'm designed that way. And I would say Shane is designed that way. So how do I recover? I love spending time with my kids. I prioritize. So basically, I'll get up early, get up at 5, work for an hour to an hour and 45 minutes, train, work, do my calls, figure out what's going on with my patients, my clients, whatever is happening. Work. I'll take my kids to school. Then I'll work the day. I will stop by 4 o'clock to spend sometimes 3:30 or 4 o'clock. Maybe 3:30, maybe 3, depending on. And I will spend 1 hour uninterrupted with my daughter. We have mommy-daughter time. Doesn't matter. Like, I'm on a massive book deadline. It's 1 hour. It's all about her. And then for the rest of the evening, I will spend with her and her brother, Leonidas, till they go to bed. And then when they go to bed, which is like 7:30, I go back to work.
How many hours of sleep do you get a night?
I'm really working on that. Hence, I'm showing up here not feeling well, right?
We all have things.
So yesterday I laid in bed at 9:30, 10 o'clock. I woke up at 6. I didn't train this morning, which was a bummer, but I'm trying to prioritize sleep a little bit more. That didn't really answer your question, but yeah. And then the other thing is I do try to take half a day off, half a day off on the weekend. But, I'm cranking and I'm working. Like, I really need a vacation now.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
We're going to go on one together.
I'm ready.
A question I get from a lot of moms is about my kids, about being a mom. What do you feed your kids? Yours are little, mine, like when I came into actually figuring out my diet, I was making myself salmon and broccoli and feeding my kids mac and cheese. So there's been an evolution with our children's diet. I wish I knew now what, when they were babies. Today is my daughter's 11th birthday. So tell me how you feed the kids.
So I can tell you yesterday,
with all the processed garbage, it starts so early. It's they wean off the breast and they're onto the goldfish diet.
Right. So for better or for worse, I tell her, certain things are junk food, and she's pretty sharp.
Yeah.
We eat a lot of high quality protein. We actually eat a lot of dairy. My kids love dairy, which, whether it's goat milk or organic cow, they really love dairy. We do canned oysters. My kid will eat canned oysters. Liver, I was able to get in them, believe it or not. And now we just do a lot of beef and chicken and eggs. But we are really clean. We don't have cereal. Yeah. She did eat a cupcake for breakfast. Her birthday, she just turned 3. Yeah. She ate a cupcake because my mom was over. She ate a cupcake for breakfast, which I would normally never feed her. Yeah. Right. Came out and she's like, chocolate over her face.
Grandma.
I'm like, off to school you go. Yeah. And then physical activity right now is really important. So I let them see a lot of physical activity. We do a lot of push-ups. We do a lot of pull-ups. We do kettlebells. They have their own little weight set and they're really little. She's 3. Yeah. And Leo is 16 months, but they're seeing it.
Is there an age where resistance training is inappropriate? I
don't know that to be true. Actually, I have a really good friend. So he has a gym called Oak Fit, Ron and Concerta, and I was over there in Texas. So basically before I was here, I was a week in Texas, came back, and then I was going to come here to see you on Wednesday, but we pushed the trip to Thursday. But after, oh God, thank God.
Coffee,
thank God.
You can grab it.
Yeah. But he has middle-aged kids in their training. It's amazing. So I don't think that there's probably some part where it's too young. We're designed to move.
Yeah.
I think that we make a lot of recommendations and we don't even know why we have them.
Yeah. Out of
all this stuff.
Fear. I don't know, they're growth plates. I
don't know. Last time I checked, Don't kids just run around and pick things up anyway?
They're crazy physical. Yeah.
So the idea that is to restrict that is weird.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to this idea that a sedentary lifestyle is in some way normal. It's not. That's a disease state. Mm-hmm. And so it really becomes interesting when we look at blood work and we look at all these studies. Again, we're not looking at a normal population. Mm-hmm. The studies are, if they are in sedentary individuals, you are looking at a diseased population.
If somebody wants to know, if you could only check like 3 labs, what would you check?
Free testosterone.
Free testosterone.
Only 3? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, only 3. That copy. This is important.
I'm useless. Hold on here. Wait. Yeah, this is a long day. Whoa. Man down. Well, only 3 is kind of tough, but free testosterone,
but that's
because then that
really
means,
makes you think.
But then that means I have to check sex hormone binding globulin. Mm-hmm. So I don't really want to do that. But let's just say free testosterone.
Okay, thanks. You got that panel.
Free testosterone. I think that's really important. I think that
for both men and women.
Yeah, and I think that the levels in women are too low. I believe that the levels that we're looking at in women, their normal ranges are too low.
Why are they low?
I just think that the way
metabolic disease? I mean, is it?
Oh, I mean, just like in general, I mean, the actual range, the ranges are too low. Why do I think that just has to be reevaluated. Mm-hmm. They're too low. So testosterone, and I very liberally will replace it. I think it's really important, especially around perimenopause. Menopause, I think it's just so important. So then the next one, for muscle health, thyroid does play a role in muscle health. Individuals with low thyroid depending affects tissue turnover. Also metabolism. Can I just look at TSH? Probably not. I would look at, T4, T3. There's no evidence that reverse T3 is helpful, but I look at it. And then, of course, the antibodies. I used to check a lot of IGF-1 and the IGF binding protein 3. I don't really check that anymore. I went through a period where I checked tons of labs, and then I scale back, and then I check tons of labs again, and then I scale back, and then I was looking at leptin and adiponectin to see how that tracked with body weight. I stopped checking that, right? But hormonal panel and thyroid are probably the most important. Could you say inflammatory markers? Yeah, but deal with your body weight.
Right. What about body composition?
So,
the best way to track
the best way, probably a DEXA with body composition, not feasible for everybody.
That's here in Omaha.
Yeah, I know, I saw it.
Down.
I was like, wow, there's lots of cornfields.
You had a DEXA recently?
I have not.
We could put you in the DEXA.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I did do it. I would totally do that.
Yeah.
So I think that DEXA, great. In body, I mean, there's so much variability, but I do use them. In my book, I write about the in-body just because it's been used in literature.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that the most important thing is like track. Look at yourself.
So body fat percentage obviously will be on there. What would be a range of healthy body fat percentage? Can you? So
I would say, people will say getting up to 30%, that's where you see the unhealthy markers. Mm-hmm. I think it's way too high. Mm-hmm. Depending on the phenotype of the individual, you're looking at, me naturally, I am a very lean person. If I were to get to 15 or 16%, that's probably really high for me.
So I was diagnosed with prediabetes, went on my low carb journey, did not get back into weightlifting until 2018. I don't even know if you know this whole story. But my first in-body, when I stepped back in the gym and was like, I got to start lifting weights again, my body fat percentage was 36%, you guys. 30. And I'm telling you, if you looked at a picture of me, nobody would have said I was overweight or obese.
See?
Nobody.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. What I think that we should do, Jaime, is we really have to shift people's perspective. What does it really look like to be, a Spartan society? What does it really look like to be really fit? Mm-hmm. So you asked me what percentage do I think is too high? I think, I think a athletic lean 20%, again, it depends on the person. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 20% would probably be okay.
What about when they look at their muscle mass, like in grams?
We don't know. We don't know.
I would love it.
Well, there's appendicular lean mass index, appendicular skeletal muscle mass index, which I do use. But again, and that's just like a number. So if less than 5 is sarcopenic, or, if you're athletic, it's at 10. I mean, it's still kind of arbitrary, but that's really the best. And people can look at the formulas for appendicular skeletal mass index.
Fascinating.
But then the next question is, what about tissue quality? So I was playing around with ultrasounds, the way in which we can look at tissue quality. Muscle is very difficult to look at because it has different fiber types. It's not homogeneous like fat tissue. When I was doing my fellowship, I had to biopsy both of them. Really, that was a really early morning. It was like 4 a.m., getting up at 3:30, having to just biopsy everybody. I mean, it was like cannula. It was like a whole thing. Fat tissue is really easy to look at because it's homogeneous. Muscle tissue, you have type 2A, type 2X, type 1 fibers. It is very different, the way in which one would look at it. Also, it doesn't, we can look at skeletal muscle mass, doesn't tell us anything about the health of the tissue. There's a conversation and there's data out there that says obese individuals have more muscle mass.
Well, that's a lot of weight to carry around.
Yeah, but there's fat infiltrated into the tissue.
Yeah.
You have intramyocellular fat. You have ectopic fat around the muscle, and then fat in the muscle like a marbled steak. But we're not addressing that. We don't look at that. We don't image it routinely. Is it difficult to do CT or MRI? Yeah, who's going to do that? We're playing around with ultrasound. But again, when you do ultrasound your bicep, you're going to be like, here's my butt, check it out.
And nobody wants muscle biopsies.
Right. No, they're not fun. And nobody wants to do them. I'm really grateful I'm not doing those anymore.
Okay. So tell us, so you're writing a book.
Yeah.
Total labor of love, because I just finished mine and it's a lot. Tell us what you can tell us about your book.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Wow.
It's right. So it's with Simon & Schuster. It is really goes the opposite direction of what everybody is talking about in terms of the longevity space. It's about optimizing for muscle, understanding that muscle is an organ, understanding ways to look at it differently, not from a performance standpoint, but actually from a medical standpoint, what we think about when we think about skeletal muscle. There's a training part in it, there's a nutrition part in it, and there is a mental framework part in it. There's a mindset component in it.
Totally necessary.
And a meal planning component.
Yeah. Okay, so it just made me think of this. So David Sinclair, obviously in the longevity space, not a fan of eating a lot of protein.
Right.
So
show me one randomized controlled trial in humans that shows lower than the RDA is more beneficial. Just show me one. Just show me one.
Yeah.
Over time. Not to say that cyclical protein restriction may not have benefit. There may be benefit in cyclical protein restriction. By cyclical protein restriction, I mean periods of time where maybe it's 3 days out of the month where you're eating low protein. Maybe you're going totally plant-based, low protein 3 days out of the month.
Fast. I mean,
yeah, or just fasting. Exactly the same. But this idea that they're extrapolating mechanistic data and saying that this translates because it's, overall, over a period of time, low protein diet, there's no data to support that being beneficial. In fact, we know that that's detrimental. How are you going to support muscle mass? Not only that, so I target muscle mass because when you target muscle, all other physiological functions fall into line. You target skeletal muscle, after skeletal muscle, you know that you've met your needs for protein turnover, which protein turnover is every portion of the body. You know that you meet your neurotransmitter needs, you meet your needs for arginine, which is a precursor for NO2, which is a vasodilator for blood pressure. You know that you meet your needs for everything. That's why I target skeletal muscle, because the body is not going to prioritize skeletal muscle if protein intake is too low. It's going to go to the immediate needs.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, so a few last questions. Does red meat cause cancer?
No.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
The internet says otherwise.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
And actually, Stu Phillips is publishing a paper. He's trying to get it published right now. And David Klurfeld, he's hoping that he will be the reviewer for it. Goes against. So there was a paper in 2014 by Morgan Levine, and that paper. These are fine scientists, Yale and Longo. She's from Yale, and Walter Longo. These are fine scientists. It's not saying anything about their science, but at the time, Cell was a relatively new journal. Nutrition science is a very specific thing. So what happened was they took mechanistic data, and then they took NHANES data, which is the largest data set. And then they took mechanistic data from their rats, and then they used NHANES data set to create this narrative about how protein and cancer and IGF-1, all this stuff goes together. Mm-hmm. But that would have never been published in a normal nutrition journal because the science was so bad. Mm-hmm. You can't just extrapolate this and take mechanistic data and then cherry pick groups, data set groups. So that paper is really, it's going to take another 10 years for it to die down. Mm-hmm. But Stu Phillips is working on having published data that does show no association. There's no association. You cannot contribute one singular thing to the demise of all humankind. Mm-hmm. And what mechanism of action is red meat causing cancer? TMAO? TMAO is mostly in fish and vegetables.
Yeah.
So what is the mechanism of action?
Yeah.
So if someone answers that, and also what kind of cancer?
Right.
Cancer is a disease of the genome. Mm-hmm. Biggest driver of cancer, aside from the genetic component, is obesity.
Mm-hmm. Does protein hurt your kidneys?
No.
Are you sure?
Fake news. I'm sure.
Fake news.
I'm sure. Multiple.
These
are multiple meta-analysis that have already come out about this.
Yeah.
In fact, it improves kidney function.
Yeah.
It improves the glomerular filtration rate.
Okay. So you guys have heard it. So to end, we do something called the Semen Analysis.
Which is very funny.
Yes. Shane, we need you. No.
Yeah. No, we don't need you. There's absolutely no more babies. It's time.
But he's going into urology, right?
Reconstructive urology.
Oh
yeah, the guy's a surgeon by nature.
Reconstructive urologist.
So his time in the teams, he was the guy, because he's a bigger dude, he was the guy that if someone got blown up from the waist down or blown up from anywhere, they'd send him in to take care of them on the field and then take them out, extract them out. So we saw a lot of below the waist kidney injuries, testicle injuries, everything. Wow. And he felt very helpless.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the Semen Analysis, eat more protein, keep the carbs low, titrate up as tolerated, don't ever eat fat, lift heavy shit.
And be tough.
Be tough. And fix your mind. I mean, I think it all starts with your mind.
Be tough.
I think that's the magic sauce.
Be a savage.
Yeah. Well, cheers to that.
Cheers.
And I'm so happy that you're here.
Yeah, we did it.
I can't wait to read your book when it comes out. And we're going to go on a vacation together. So if you guys...
I need a vacation.
Comment below where Gabrielle and I are going.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Include like beach workouts and meat
and laying on the beach, and
we let our kids run around.
No, there's no children on this vacation.
Sorry, kids.
And no husbands.
Oh, Shane and
you're out.
They just got axed.
You guys are axed. Goodbye.
All right.
Thanks so much for having me.
So wonderful. Thank you guys for listening. Please download the episode, leave us your reviews. That stuff just helps us get the message out on everything that we've talked about. And I think these are just important things that need to be spread around. And so tell people how to follow you, because they already do, but tell people how to find you.
Instagram, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. I have a new podcast out, The Dr. Gabrielle Lyon Show.
So good.
Thank you. Which you'll have to come in, but you got to come in person.
Yeah.
And I have a new website coming out. I have a newsletter, YouTube. It's just Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. And am I forgetting anything else? Twitter, not super active. Yeah. If people are interested in being a patient and they know you personally, can make a referral or they can apply.
Okay. Wonderful. You guys go check her out. Her content is absolutely incredible. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.